When we develop anything new product-wise, we want to make sure that it's got the core Fender tone.
Right.
The springy, beautiful, trebly, crystalline bell-like tone, the twang of a Tele, the snap of a Stratocaster. And so that's always at the heart of everything we do.
Hey guys, now a few weeks ago I did an interview with Allen Abbassi, who's the Senior Product Development Manager from Fender. In that interview we talked about the problem of counterfeit guitars and how it affected Fender. Now in this interview that I'm about to show you, we talk about another really interesting topic, and that is basically how does Fender come up with new models and new guitars to make? Fender has such a long history and so much tradition attached to it. It seemed to me like Fender would have a hard time deviating very much from their existing models. So the question became, how do they keep the legacy and tradition of Fender intact while also producing something new and interesting for guitar players? Alright guys, so let's sit down with Allen Abbassi from Fender. Let's check it out. Hey guys, here we are at Thomann Gearhead University 2019. Really excited about this. I've got Allen Abbassi with me, and he's the Senior Product Development Manager at Fender. Thanks a lot for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me, Max. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, something I'm always curious about with Fender is Fender has such a great history, such a great legacy.
Right.
You know, as far as electric guitars go, it's certainly one of the oldest companies.
Sure.
When you guys are working on a new product, how do you tie in, the old and still do something new and fresh? The legacy and the tradition, because guitar players really are traditionalists in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
How do you tie that tradition and legacy in? How do you balance that with bringing out something that's new and exciting and fresh and keeping things relevant?
That's a very good question. It is challenging sometimes because Leo's designs from the 50s and 60s are darn near perfect, and we're still making guitars almost the same way today with the bolt-on necks and using lacquer and urethane and other materials. So it is a challenge. I think what we do is we always, first of all, when we develop anything new product-wise, we want to make sure that it's got the core Fender tone.
Right.
The springy, beautiful, trebly, crystalline bell-like tone, the twang of a Tele, the snap of a Stratocaster. And so that's always at the heart of everything we do. Even if we try something new and more modern, we still want to have that tone at the core, right? But I think one of the ways we do this, maintain the legacy and do new stuff, is we have different series that kind of approach the different customers and different types of instruments that we sell. So we do have a couple series that are designed just to be just like a vintage instrument.
Right.
That would be currently the Classic series and our American Original series. So we have instruments that we make that are dedicated to building them just like the way Leo built them, with lacquer and the right Alnico magnets and neck shapes and all that kind of stuff. And then we have other series where we kind of stretch out a little bit and do more modern things. I think for us, what we like to do is obviously try new pickups, and we play with bridges and parts and things like that. But it is difficult because the designs are already so pretty perfect, right? For instance, one of the things we did on our new American Performer series that we just launched in January was that evolved from our American Special series. And we expanded the series, offered some basses and Jazz Masters and Mustangs. The pickups were the heart of the guitar, and we kind of approached those in a different way. Normally, Alnico 5 is the magnet of choice for a Fender pickup, and we played with Alnico 4 magnets, working with our pickup guru, Tim Shaw. And he developed a great set of new pickups for all the American Performer series. So part of the product development is obviously paying homage to the legacy, and part of it is also talking to players and dealers and seeing what people are into and what features people are actually looking for, and we try and infuse that into our traditional designs.
I mean, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes because it seems like it's a big challenge because there's so many just like diehard, like I said, traditionalists.
Oh yeah.
Who are like, they want it exactly,
Oh, yeah.
how the history was. But then there's a whole other crowd of people, and they're like, well, we've seen that guitar before.
Right.
Give us something new. And something I think about also is with the signature guitars. Famous artists who are playing the guitars. Sometimes they end up making pretty extensive modifications to an original design with pickups or maybe at a Floyd Rose bridge or something like that.
Right.
They do those mods themselves as they're developing as an artist, and then it ends up becoming an official Fender guitar.
That's right. Jim Root's a perfect example. He's got a few different signature models, like a Jazz Master and a Telecaster, and he's got active EMG pickups in there and compound radius and ebony fretboards, which is not really the traditional Fender stuff, but they're wonderful instruments. So that's another way that we do kind of stretch out a little, is working with artists. And they modify the designs to their own desires quite a lot, which is really fun. We've also started kind of introducing new series that do draw outside the Fender lines a little more, like the Alternate Reality series that we've released this year has a lot of wonderful new instruments. There's a guitar that's a shrunken down jazz bass body. That's a 6-string guitar called the 66, and it's got a humbucker and 2 single coils that are chrome covered. So it looks like a little jazz bass, but it's a guitar.
I saw that. I saw one of those in the showroom
today.
Yeah.
And the Meteora is another example. One of our engineers, Josh from Nashville, had designed this beautiful shape based loosely around a Jazz Master shape, and it looks really kind of forward-thinking and aggressive. And that Meteora has been released now as a double humbucker guitar. So we are kind of doing. We always want to push the boundaries of what we can do, and I think nowadays more than ever before, our customers are giving us the permission to do other shapes and to play around with the Fender elements and kind of do mashups of our own stuff. And it seems like that stuff is very successful these days.
Is there any sort of process you have if you've got maybe an idea that you guys are kicking around, but you're not 100% sure how the customers are going to react to it? Is there any sort of beta testing or something like that you guys can do? Yeah.
Absolutely. Almost everybody in our product department, first of all, is a musician, either active or former. And so we start with our own focus group. Do these pickups sound good? What do you guys think? And we get kind of a consensus. But absolutely, we have artists coming into the office in Hollywood all the time. And we recently did like a pickup shootout with some pickups that we were designing for some of the newer instruments coming out this year, and had a lot of local artists from LA sit down and play the instruments, and we got their opinions and talked to them about what they liked and didn't like. So we absolutely do kind of focus group stuff, and it's a little bit of all of that.
Yeah.
Because I've been working for Fender for 20 years, and you kind of get used to the feel and sound of what a Fender should be when you're around them all the time. And it's nice to have that. There's a lot of people at work with me that are just as experienced. So we kind of have a vibe for what Fender tone and feel is all about. And then, of course, you talk to the people that are playing them for a living all the time, and you get their perspective. So we kind of have a mixture of both of those elements going on, for sure.
I think aside from the players, people playing the instruments, producers and engineers are really closely tied in with the instruments also. Because I know a lot of guys who, a band will go into the studio and they've got all their, crazy, progressive, heavy guitars that they come in with. And the producer will have some traditional Strat, sitting there on the side. And always at some point, I can't even think of how many times I've seen that, where at some point they're working on a track and they're like, it just doesn't have that cut that they need or that tone. And the producer, well, hey, let's try this. And they bring out the Strat.
Right, or a P-bass or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that. You're right. A lot of producers these days are actually quite accomplished musicians themselves. And so a lot of them have a real keen sense of what's going to work in a mix. So the producers absolutely these days, I think more than ever, get involved in helping to, develop a sound and having their own set of instruments that they use as go-tos.
Yeah.
And Fender seems to be in a lot of those guys' catalog.
I think Fender is in a somewhat unique position because the company has been around so long. As the company, you go back to the 50s, as the company has developed until now, the recording industry has been developing along, simultaneously. And so all those production techniques and recording techniques, the Fender has always been there during those things.
Yeah.
So it's a consistent ingredient.
Exactly. Yeah. They know that, a nice Strat through a 65 Deluxe reverb, they can count on that sound every time. And I think you're right. The better producers have a keen ear for that stuff, and they know just what's going to sit in the mix right. And the best ones are good at choosing the gear also that helps get the sounds that they're looking for.
Well, is there anything that you can talk about that, coming up soon that you're particularly excited about?
To kind of mention what I talked about before, our American Performer series was brand new from January, and that was like kind of the big launch from our Corona factory. Again, we worked with Tim Shaw to get some great Alnico 4 pickups. We added a Mustang and a Jazz Master to the series, and a jazz bass and a P bass. So the American Performer was probably the cool new thing for us so far.
I'll keep an eye out, and hopefully when that stuff comes out, I can do some coverage on that stuff.
Absolutely.
But Alan, thanks a ton for
Thank you,
sitting
Max.
down with me, Matt. That was great. Okay, guys, there you go. Now, I think a lot of us can admit that guitar players tend to be traditionalists. You know, you don't want to play an instrument that looks too weird or too strange compared to everything that came before it. And I think that's a really interesting position that Fender is in now, where they have this long history, decades and decades, all these iconic designs that came out, but they still don't want to be stuck in a rut. They don't want to be always producing the same guitars over and over again. I think Alan made a really good point there when he said that there's always going to be a market for those classic, older designs, the guitars made exactly how they were back in the day, but then there's a lot of other people who want something new and interesting and innovative. As always, I would love to hear what you thought of that interview. Please give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time.